Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report. This is the space where we bring you Black America's headline news, views, and opinions. I'm Romeo.
Hey there, I'm Brooke.
I'm Demi, and Nielle is out today.
Coming up for you on today's report, the trial of Kim Porter is ongoing. The jury is deliberating. They're on their third day. Sue Ann Robinson joins us to break everything down. Plus, Derek Chauvin, we're breaking down his plea deal and the potential reasons why what's in it is there.
Also, former NFL player Glenn Foster Jr.'s family has said his autopsy did not suggest natural causes. And guess who got the company Sean John back in action?
I wonder who. Soulmates, we have all that and so much more. This is our voice and our truth, so let's get it.
Soulmates, good evening. We begin today with breaking news. Student loan repayments will not resume February 1st. Instead, forgiveness relief will be extended until May 1st. President Joe Biden announcing the 90-day extension, saying, quote, this is happening, quote, as we manage the ongoing pandemic and further strengthen our economic recovery. This is something many people have been hoping for, frustrated about. Of course, this is not exactly what many have been asking. They're asking for full-out student loan forgiveness. This is an extension. And, you know, I'm curious because this is something we talked about when the student loan forgiveness was kind of on the table, but not really happening. But the first time the relief was extended, there were people saying the worry is that that's just what will continue to happen. Just extending the relief, until it's another president's problem.
I mean, extending doesn't really equal relief for me because it reminds me of the talk about rent moratoriums. When you just keep giving someone a moratorium and you move it back, you still have to pay that back once this starts back. So it's not really relief. It's temporary non-payment. When I talk about the moratorium, I always said people need money. And so what would help is to just cancel it altogether. It's not relief by just pushing it back if I still have to owe it. It's just temporarily not having to pay it in the back of my mind, but it's still owed.
And what's been going on the last 2 years with this pandemic, I think if they had a forgiveness grant, a loan, an aid, whatever it is, not even a loan, but just pay it all the way off because at the end of the day, if you do this, what are you doing? You're giving students a jump start into their future, and also they're going to get back to the economy. So instead of being in debt, not having the money to help the economy, they'll have that money to do so and to grow from.
I agree. 100% really important. You know, it's also obviously Omicron is surging and we're seeing that. And this is many people not being able to work, not being able to make the type of money that they used to make. Because even if you get some sort of relief from your job, you're still dealing with being out of work. And for some people who rely on tips, things may look a little different. Also, the fact of the matter is the president was in a hard space with the Build Back Better plan being seemingly dead at this point, child tax credits ending, but student loan repayments beginning. And again, yes, Omicron on top of that. And so do you think everyone's happy?
No, I think that it's more of a slap in the face right now, to be honest with you. I stand proud about my thoughts about student loans. And so it's a slap in the face, to be honest with you. The amount of money that I know that I owe right now in student loans is insane. And to know that just for some months or for a year I didn't have to pay for it sounds fun. But again, Joe Biden, you can do more. There's more that you can do. Maybe you can't just a flick of a pen like Senator Elizabeth Warren says, but I'm sure that there is more that you can do. If they found a way to go 1 or 2 years without those payments, just wipe it out altogether.
And listen, there's a larger conversation to be had when it comes to the economy and specifically Black Americans and what this would mean for Black Americans, what this would mean in the future. And we're going to continue to have this conversation because, as we just mentioned, it's not over. No. But relief has been extended. All right, moving on to our top story this morning, the manslaughter trial of Kim Porter. So that's a former Minnesota police officer who says she mistook her firearm for her taser when she shot and killed Daunte Wright during a traffic stop last April. Jurors are deliberating. They're in day 3 of deliberations, and there's been some interesting developments. The jury deliberated over 9 hours Tuesday, more than 5 hours the day before. As CNN reports, Kim Porter has pleaded not guilty to both charges of first-degree and second-degree manslaughter. The central point of the case is on the jury's interpretation of Porter's fatal error. Was it due to her recklessness and negligence, as the prosecution argues, or was it an unfortunate accident that does not rise to the level of a crime, as the defense has argued. The jury has asked a couple of things. So they asked the court that if zip ties securing the weapon used that day, they asked for an evidence box to be removed specifically so that they could hold the handgun. Judge Regina Chu actually allowed the zip ties to be removed so jurors could handle the gun, which of course is not loaded and is fully secured. They wanted to be able to touch her handgun, and we're going to break down, I know that, a little bit more.
Yeah. Joining us now to break down the case is attorney Sue Ann Robinson. Welcome back to the Black Report, Sue Ann.
Thank you.
We are so happy to have you back. Let's hop right into it because we always have so much to break down when you come on the show. So I'd like to know, does the request to review the evidence suggest that the jury is leaning one way or the other?
I think that their initial question of what to do if they can't come to a consensus signals that there's some holdouts in either direction, either for or against conviction. Because they're contemplating now, they're saying, hey, listen, we voted and we haven't been able to come to a unanimous verdict. What do? The judge just reread the instruction, basically telling them that they need to work until they come to a unanimous verdict. And then in terms of the evidence that they're asking to look at and to see, I think it's so critical that they're asking to see this evidence because it tells me that the question that they're trying to answer by actually physically touching Kim Potter's weapon is whether or not her claim that this was a mistake is genuine. Can you actually mistake a handgun that has a completely different trigger, completely different weight, is deployed completely differently? Could you actually make that mistake and think it's a taser? And I think by them getting that handgun into their hands, or touching it, they're trying to see whether or not, or what the differences are between a taser and a handgun. And that's important because the jury has to not only evaluate the oral testimony, but the physical evidence as well.
So I want to follow up on that just a little bit there, because in the eyes of the law, can you break that down a little bit more? The importance of her intent, whether it was an accident or whether it was negligence, what do either look like? How would this even be something the jury would determine?
Yeah, I think for these charges that she has, first or second degree manslaughter, the state would have to have proven that there was a conscious or intentional act regarding handling her gun that created a risk that she was aware of but disregarded. That's for first degree manslaughter. And so the state's argument with respect to first degree manslaughter was that of course she was aware of the risk. She's a 26-year veteran. She should always be aware of the risk of her handgun, and making a mistake like that, especially because she's such a decorated officer with so much experience, she should be aware of where her handgun is, where her taser is, what the difference is, what they feel like, etc. And then also, even with her aiming the gun at Daunte Wright's chest, there was a lot of testimony about the fact that if it was a taser, it shouldn't have been aimed at his chest. And there was also testimony stating that she actually put the officer that she claimed she was protecting in danger. And we have to remember there was collateral damage from what she did that put others at risk. She shot Daunte Wright, causing the car to roll into another vehicle and cause a traffic accident with an elderly man who since the accident has been in critical condition in hospice and near death. And his family testified at the very beginning of the trial. So her actions had a rippling effect on other people's lives because she disregarded the fact that she was escalating the situation to essentially deadly force. I think what works against Kim in Ms. Potter, former Officer Potter in this case, is one, that her defense is that it was a mistake, yet her attorneys kept repeating that Daunte Wright caused his own death. Either it's a mistake and your client is sorry for it, or you're putting it back on the victim of the crime and saying that he caused his own death. I think that's a very big problem for her. I also think when she took the stand and advised that she was, a training officer, we all watch Training Day. So we all have our own opinion of what happens during the officer's training. But she testified that the officer that she was training, Officer Lucky, who obviously wasn't so lucky, wanted to stop Daunte Wright's vehicle because he had an air freshener hanging. in his from his rearview mirror. And then she testified that she actually would not have stopped the vehicle for that reason. So if you're the training officer, why would you allow your trainee to do something that you wouldn't even do? So I think those are just some of the things that work against her in this case, and in terms of her testimony and what was presented on her behalf.
Yeah, Attorney Susan Robinson joined us here on Fox Soul Black Report, and I'm glad we're still talking about the training situation. Also, about even to this point, it has to be brought up her using the taser in that case. Obviously, she put people in danger. We know what happened there, right? So, how much is her training responsible for her behavior? And at the end of the day, will that play out how this trial may come out?
I think rules are rules, and the jury has been given the rules. Under the circumstance, her using her taser was not appropriate because she was escalating the force. And so you have to understand that if she was trained not to use her taser under that circumstance, and she's trained to actually de-escalate, then she's wrong from the start for even using a taser or a handgun. She shouldn't have been using either of those things. And I think the jury is wrestling with that now in testimony. If there's one thing that I feel like the state didn't make 100% clear, is certainly that under the circumstance of a traffic stop that started based on air freshener, certainly escalating it to deadly force would not be appropriate and wouldn't be congruent with her training.
You mentioned her being a decorated police officer, now former police officer, and so there was this story that I brought up. I believe that Ben Crump might have posted it as well, but it was a couple of days ago that told the story of a few years ago that she was involved in a situation where another person of color died, and so she arrived to the scene and told her officers, hey, turn off your body camera footage. And so, you know, people are, that family is kind of speaking up right now and being like, hey, we've been asking for 2 years for Kim Potter to be removed from the force. We also saw with Derek Chauvin that he had a previous case where someone died, and so they were trying to get him off the force for a lot of years. So how much do you think that'll weigh? I don't know how much it weighed for Derek Chauvin, but how much do you think it'll weigh with her having a previous situation, someone already wanting to get her off the force, and so now this situation happens with Daunte Wright? Will that weigh, you know, at all in her in the final deliberation with her?
I think that the jury is in a bubble, and so they're only going to get certain kinds of evidence, certain types of information, and the defense is going to do their best to keep previous incidents that we in the court of public opinion will think are directly related out of evidence. I think it's important that the jury won't get to even consider, but they will be aware of another high-profile case that happened in Minnesota with Officer Noor, just in the same jurisdiction, where an officer of color shot a white female victim, and he was sentenced to 12 years. He appealed his case. He was very remorseful. He again stated that was an accident immediately after it occurring. Was very upset, extremely remorseful, got on the stand. He cried as well, and he was convicted and sentenced to 12 years. So I just don't see how you can have a situation where the victim is Black, an officer made a mistake, a criminally reckless mistake, and Kim Potter not be convicted, but Officer Noor in the same jurisdiction in Minnesota be serving 12 years for a similar mistake.
So you mentioned Officer Noor on the stand testifying, crying, and obviously Kim Potter, also took the stand in her own defense, which in other high-profile cases, there's obviously been a big discussion on whether that's a turning point in the case. Derek Chauvin chose not to take the stand, which is 100% was his right at the time. Kyle Rittenhouse taking the stand, crying, many people feeling as if the jury needed that changed, was a turning point in the case. Also in Georgia, Travis McMichael took the stand, also could be seen as a turning point in the case in another direction, because that was pretty damning testimony, right? And so I'm curious of your thoughts overall with Kim Potter's testimony.
I wasn't a fan of Kim Potter's testimony, just mainly because a lot of the defense's arguments had to do with her being so remorseful, so moved, and all her emotional responses right after she killed Daunte Wright. And when she was on the stand and she was asked, particularly what she said or about what she was doing right after the shooting, she said she didn't remember. She couldn't remember anything. So it's, because we're watching that video and we're seeing that very, very emotional response, obviously the jury is honing in on that and using that to say, yeah, maybe this was a mistake. Look how she's reacting. And then when she was asked on direct, what were you saying or what were you doing? She said she didn't remember. I think part of it had to do with the fact that she also said during her crying and things like that, just after the murder, she said, I'm going to prison. So I guess maybe she didn't want to repeat that or remember that she said that on the video, but it's there for the jury to see and for all of us to see as well. So we can remember for her. But I don't think that weighed in her favor for her saying she couldn't recall something when we all saw it on video.
Sue-Ann, it is such an honor to have you. So many questions are always in our minds, and you can just help us get the answers that we need. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Anytime.
All right, take care.
We'll see you next time.
Bye, soulmates.
Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin pled guilty to killing George Floyd in 2020 after he pinned his knee on the back of Floyd's neck, even though he was aware Floyd had lost consciousness and pulse. Before the plea deal, Chauvin requested that he be allowed to do his time in federal prison, even if it means he will serve a longer sentence. Under the agreement Chauvin signed in the U.S. District Court in St. Paul, Minnesota on Wednesday, he must serve a minimum of 20 years in prison and a maximum of 25 years. So we already know why he wants to be there, because it's safer for him, obviously, right? But, when someone did this crime, in which he did, and the world saw, that was so disgusting, it bothers me that someone even has a choice where they get to serve their time. Now, granted, being in jail, federal, regular jail, prison, it's not good. No one wants to do that. No one wants to do that. But in this particular case, I wish there was a situation where we're saying you don't get to pick and choose where you're going to serve your time at.
Well, he gets to choose where he wants to go, but the final decision will come down to the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So, yes, he can say, I'd like to go to this federal prison, but they get to make the final decision. I'm with you, Romeo. I agree 1,000% that he shouldn't be able to choose whether it's federal or state. Back to what you were saying about him wanting to feel more safe. He was like, hey, I've been a police officer for 19 years, and there's a chance that I could end up in prison with someone that I sent to jail that's going to be upset in a state prison, and I don't want to have that smoke. He also says that federal prison is nicer, but also the Floyd family wants him to go to the federal prisons as well over the state prison. So definitely we'll be interested to see which prison he goes to, and if he goes to a federal or state prison, and if he goes to federal prison, which one that he ends up going to. If it's the one that he wants to go to, definitely want to be following this story for sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting because obviously in federal prison, he's a state police officer, right? He's a city police officer, but he works for the state, not the feds. And so in the federal prison, there's no one that he potentially put in prison. So it's different. He's able to possibly have a different life in prison. This man is going to spend at least 15 years in prison. He's looking at the next 15 years. And honestly, this federal prison deal means that he's going to spend more time in prison, because obviously the restrictions look a little bit different when it comes to good behavior and time out than had he just had the state deal. And so this is giving him more time, but yeah, maybe somewhat an easier time serving it. It just seems like it's still prison. And 10, 15 years in prison is an incredibly long time.
Definitely is.
Yeah. All right, this next story has been something that has gone viral. It's caused people across the entire country to be concerned. Kim Kardashian is getting involved. A man named Rohil Aguilera Medeiros, he is the driver, a truck driver. He was working when he crashed his semi-truck into stopped traffic. It happened in Lakewood, Colorado back in 2019. His brakes failed in his vehicle. 4 people were killed. Several others were hurt. The crash ended up damaging 28 cars. Aguilera Medeiros was only 23 years old at the time, and prosecutors say he passed one of Colorado's runway truck ramps after losing the braking mechanism on his truck when he was driving. The prosecution says he could have done this more safely, right? He could have exited, he could have pulled off the road. He has long said he tried to pull over, but there was another truck already stopped, and he did what he could. He was sentenced to more than 100 years in prison. So the judge in the case seemingly frustrated with having to give out this sentence, right? Saying that he had to because of mandatory minimums in the state of Colorado. He, Aguilera Medeiros, has long said, you know, I'm not a killer. I didn't murder anybody. I'm not a murderer. I didn't mean to do this. He's been incredibly remorseful, so sorry. More than 4 million people have signed a petition on change.org asking for him to not have to serve 110 years in prison, which is obviously no one's going to serve 110 years in prison. But also, his lawyers have sent a request to the governor, of Colorado asking for clemency. The governor's representative coming out saying we've received it. We are investigating, we are reviewing his submission right now. Again, Kim Kardashian getting involved. Truckers have been protesting. This has caused a massive conversation. And then the big question that this all goes back to is that everyone ahead of time knew the mandatory minimums, right? Everyone ahead of time knew the mandatory minimums. Why did the prosecutor pursue this case in this way, knowing that the actual prosecutor in the case actually under fire right now because of reports of a deleted Facebook post where she posted a picture of a brake shoe as a trophy and celebration for winning the case?
Yeah.
That's causing frustration because, you know, at the heart of all of this entire story, 4 people lost their lives. And so people are finding a hard time with anything being celebratory. The big news this morning in this is that Colorado DA has actually submitted a motion in hopes that because there are extenuating circumstances, seemingly the fact that everybody concedes this was a mistake, because there are extenuating circumstances, that this case can be looked into.
Yeah, definitely.
The sentence.
Yeah, Brooke, there is absolutely nothing to celebrate right now. And like you said, back to Kim Kardashian, she absolutely hopped in. And a lot of people are saying, okay, great, you know, maybe Kim Kardashian can help kind of rewrite some of the wrongs here. She also, like you said, I was happy that she did call out the prosecutor, and she called it a tone-deaf Facebook post celebrating the conviction, because not only is that tone-deaf, it is just so disrespectful and also inappropriate, unprofessional. I mean, so many words we can think of, but also another issue that a lot of people are having, they're comparing, well, just one second, I just want to go back. So I saw this post earlier that compared, okay, they were saying, okay, was he reckless? Many people said, yes, he was reckless because although his brakes failed, he was going 85 and a 45. He also failed to use a runway truck ramp on the side. So that is a fact that many are acknowledging, like, yes, maybe there was some recklessness that went on here, but back to what you were saying, 110 years is just incredibly insane. Comparing Ethan Couch, a lot of people are saying because he also killed 4 people, but he was driving under the influence. He was driving on a restricted driver's license, and he only got 10 years of probation. So that's where, if you see like a side by side, a lot of people are saying, okay, this is not making any sense. 2 cases seemingly similar, but one here, Ethan Couch is white, and then you have a person of color here that's kind of like, okay, this is not really adding up at all. So that's what a lot of people are wondering, how is this possible right now?
Yeah, it's so unfortunate. At the end of the day, he was speeding, right? That's what they're saying. He was speeding. People do it all the time on the freeways when we're coming to and from work, right? So we're all in some way guilty of that. But for this man to have to serve pretty much life in prison, because that's what it is, because he's not going to last, 110 years or something like that. Look, we can't bring back the people that passed away, but here was a man that originally came here because he wanted to do something for his family. He thought he was doing the right thing, and one mistake led to a bad situation. And I don't think he should have to serve this much time. Like you said, those 2 cases just don't match up when they come to giving people the time served that they have to serve in that situation.